This is Valerie Jones, Careers Editor with Rigzone, and I'll be speaking with special guest, Mr. Dan Schabel, a workplace and millennials expert. Dan will provide us more insight on millennials in the workplace. Today's workforce has a new majority, according to Pew Research Center, and that's millennials, adults born between the early 1980s and mid-1990s. Rigzone recently surveyed almost 1,000 millennials, also referred to as Gen Y, across the globe to find out their values, their concerns, and what attracts them to the oil and gas industry. Our guest, Dan Schabel, is a workplace and millennials expert. He's the founder of WorkplaceTrends.com, a research and advisory service for HR professionals, and he's managing partner of Millennial Branding, a Gen Y research and consulting firm. Forbes has even called him one of the nation's leading authorities on millennials. Today, he's speaking with Rigzone about the changing dynamics of today's workforce. Dan, millennials are projected to comprise 75% of the global workforce by 2025. Can you identify the biggest difference in workplace behaviors between A, millennials and Gen Xers, and B, millennials and baby boomers?
The biggest difference between millennials and older generations is that millennials choose meaningful work as a high priority. They seek freedom and flexibility, the ability to work from whenever and wherever they want. They want to abolish the 9-to-5 workday. They don't understand why it exists. It doesn't really pertain to them in a world that's hyper-connected. They are the most optimistic generation despite economic setbacks. A lot of them are still living with their parents and their siblings. There's $1.3 trillion of student loan debt. So they've really suffered, yet are very optimistic. But at the same time, they believe that they won't be getting Social Security and that they'll retire around 72 to 76 years old. They're the most diverse generation. They are the largest generation in America with 80 million, and that's 4 million more than boomers, Gen X only being 45 million. They have a strong sense of morality. They want equal rights. That's really important to them. So gender rights, fair wages, as well as gay and lesbian rights. And they're all about collaboration as well, meaning that this is a group that will use technology to come up with new ideas, to brainstorm, and to solve problems. They are all about continuous learning. They're learning every single second, every single day. They want constant feedback and mentoring, meaning that they don't want to wait a year to have an annual performance review. They need feedback along the way, maybe even in real time. And they are less loyal than older generations. Boomers stayed at a job for 10 years, whereas millennials leave every other year. And what's interesting about our research is we found that about a fourth of them say you only should be at a company for under a year. And they're all goal-oriented, they're very competitive, and they're all about the contribution results.
The oil and gas industry will need more young leaders to step up as baby boomers retire. However, employers often say millennials lack soft skills. What kinds of leaders do millennials make, and how can they become better leaders, especially when managing workers several years their senior?
We did a study, and the majority of millennials, over 90%, want to be leaders. That's part of their ambition. They're transformational leaders, which is different than the autocratic leaders we have right now who are governing companies. We're boomers, so they want to encourage other people to succeed. They want to basically change companies and how they're built and the company cultures to better fit them, their needs, and the future of work. I think that the oil and gas industry, I think manufacturing, there's certain industries that are really going to have trouble recruiting millennials because they're very, old school. They're not very modern. They have more archaic workplace environments. The work is more routine, whereas millennials want something that's exciting, high-growth industries. They really seek technology. Companies and startups, they're less likely to work at large companies. And so I think that's this huge struggle that those industries are going to have to deal with. And in order to cope, the number one thing that all employees of all ages still look for is salary, so competitive wages, if you can be competitive in that respect. That's number one. Number two is healthcare benefits. The rising cost of healthcare, if you're a company that covers that, that's very important. Number two is engagement level, meaning that providing them continuous feedback and support, and a mentor who's an executive, flattening out your organization, allowing millennials to more or less communicate with executive leadership and decision makers. There's a lot of different things that you can do, and perks. You hear about perks all over the media about, give them beer, give them free coffee, and they'll be happy. In fact, perks have very little impact. It's really about the top-down leadership, having somebody who's very open to conversations with millennials, mentoring, of course, the feedback aspect, and then showing millennials that the work they do every day is making an impact on their team, their manager, the company, the customers, and the world at large.
Millennials value career advancement and aren't afraid to pursue opportunities at other jobs or companies if it helps their career in the long run. What does this mean, and how recruiters and employers should approach their hiring strategies of millennials?
One of the most important things is you want to create a good hiring experience for millennials. And that means you don't want to have these auto responses that are set up. Millennials really want something more customized. They want to feel like the company at least is paying attention to them. Millennials want companies to not only be on social networks, but to respond and be active on these networks. We're entering the world of the humanization of brands, meaning that brands have to be more like people, and people, in a sense, have to be more like brands. And as a result of that, it's put a lot more pressure on companies to allocate, resources to social networking, etc. I think in terms of capturing their attention, giving them a good hiring experience, recruiting experience, even if they don't get the job, is important, because they'll tell their friends about the experience, and that could hurt your brand from an employment branding perspective. I think in terms of leadership, in terms of recruiting, all across the board, what they're really looking for is transparency and honesty in leaders and in workplace practices. And if you're not honest and open, if you don't tell them exactly what it's going to be like to work at your company, then you're creating a disconnect in the experience that they'll have. And so even if they start working for you, they're already going to be looking for their next job. And 60% already are like that.
How do millennials communicate in the workplace? And how do they best receive communication? Further, how can millennials communicate with Gen Xers and baby boomers in the most efficient manner?
Well, that's a great question. And I would say that based on all of my research, and I'm launching my 25th research study soon on generations and workplace trends, what I've noticed is that every generation would rather meet in person than online. Everyone, from 16 years old to 65 years old. We have an inherent desire to be with someone in person. It's the reason why if you're in prison in solitary confinement, you lose your mind. It's because you have to be around other people. You go crazy, you become awkward, bad things happen. They want those in-person meetings, but they're relying too much on technology. So I'm not saying technology is not a good starting point for establishing a first mode of contact, but I think technology needs to be used in order to create more in-person meetings, if necessary, not wasted meetings. The millennials complain about in-person meetings that are just live on and on and on and don't get them anywhere. And so I think using the technology to facilitate in-person discussions is really important, because it's good for soft skills that companies are looking for. The number one skill that companies are looking for when hiring is communication skills, and that hasn't really changed. Using technology for collaboration to get people of all genders and ages and cultures on the same page in one platform, which flattens out the organization. And then leveraging that platform as a way to have more meetings, conferences, outings is going to be what works for companies.
Great. I'd like to thank you again, Dan, for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being on your show.
If you'd like to learn more about Dan or his experience with millennials, visit his website, www.danschabel.com. And thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow me on Twitter for more career-related news and tips. You can also search the hashtag JobVidsByVal. Bye.